You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. I'm your host, Stuart Deloney. And guess what? It's Thanksgiving week. So, happy Thanksgiving. Gobble, gobble, and whatever other crap you tell people during Thanksgiving week. I hope you guys are all out there enjoying your week, enjoying your short work week, unless you're working in the service industry and you're stuck working Black Friday or Black Thursday, Black Wednesday. I don't even know how this works out. And if you are those folks, I'm so sorry. Really, actually, I am. This is probably the retail realm of hell that you're dealing with. So today's show is going to mainly be centered around an interview I did with one of my good friends, Kris Lowen, who recently wrote a book. But this is Snarky Faith Radio, and it's my job to give you some snark. So before we get to that, I'm going to give you this. So I know it's not Christmas time yet. I know that there's many radio stations that are already playing Christmas music, and it's not even Thanksgiving. We want to talk about atrocities and abominations. That is the core of it. That's the center of it. Seriously, people, at least wait until after Thanksgiving to start playing this god-awful Christmas music and dumping it down our throats. But what I did want to do on this week of thankfulness and Thanksgiving, I wanted to give you some nuggets of wisdom or crackpot insanity. Depending upon where you stand and which camp you're in, I will let you decide which is which. Now, my camp would tell me, this is craziness, and you love it, because that's what I like to give to you guys. This is some Christmas talk by good old Jim Bakker. That's right, Jim Bakker is talking about the atrocities that are happening in our country. Gun violence? No, that's not an atrocity. Oh, police violence? No, that's not the atrocity. No. LGBT rights? No, that's not the atrocity we're going to go after today. No, it's the fact that people aren't allowed to say Merry Christmas in Walmart. Don't believe me? Hear it from the crackpot yourself.
I've been shopping for Christmas ornaments about Jesus. I'm not anti-Santa Claus. I just don't want him in my face every minute because it's the birthday of Jesus Christ.
Or you don't want the holiday tree. You want a Christmas tree.
I do.
Right?
And I want to be able to. They outlawed Merry Christmas a few years ago, and you know it.
But you know, Jim?
You couldn't even say Merry Christmas at Walmart. And the Walmart greeters told me they weren't allowed to say it. Well, but we all started writing, and what did we do? We changed it.
Yes.
We changed it. We all worked together. You don't have to lay down for it.
Oh, that's right. Wait, let's give him a hand. Come on. Yes. We've changed it. Whatever the hell that means. Somehow, Christian Broadcasting Network has changed the fact that you can now say Merry Christmas to people because that's been outlawed. And seriously, who goes looking for Christmas ornaments at Walmart? Right? Isn't that what Amazon's for? Seriously, dude. Come on, Jim. Get with the times, my friend. And yes, if that silly statement wasn't enough, I've got two for you. That's right. It's a Thanksgiving miracle. It is. It's right here. Glory to God. We have a Thanksgiving miracle. So let's go ahead and hear about Jim Bakker talking about Trump and the end times. Because that, whatever doesn't get you going, this will get you going.
If they kill our president or they destroy him or whatever, if we elect the other side, I mean, they've come out against God. They just said, we don't want God even in their platform. So this is it, John.
Listen.
I think maybe Trump is here to give us time to get ready, because all hell's going to break loose. And we're not going to have the Antichrist show up to get the sign of the mark of the beast on our forehead. It won't happen without hunger. Hunger is going to be the main thing. You don't get it. Most people don't want to get it. But that's why I'm so obsessed with you all being prepared.
One day, Jim was teaching many years ago on Revelation. And he said, the reason you'll take the mark of the beast is because you're hungry. Your children are hungry. Your grandchildren are hungry.
I hear them crying. I've heard them crying for years. And God said, what will we do? What will you do if these babies are starving?
First of all, Jim Baker, I'm pretty sure this is like the unwritten Christian rule. If anyone's going to talk about the end times, you somehow, I think, are legally required to mention Kirk Cameron. Like, that's a must. So first of all, party foul on you. And secondly, for those that haven't heard the entire clip of his show, what he's doing is he's selling end of times food on his show and using his crackpot Revelations talk from the Bible to be able to sell that. You know, much like the Sean Hannitys and the Glenn Becks of this world, where you can get this survival gear because he's telling people the main reason that people are going to turn to the Antichrist and Satan are basically because you're not willing to buy his pancake mix. The pancake mix that's not quite as good as Bisquick, but it'll help you not take the mark of the beast. That's what we're talking about here. Oh, gosh, Jim. Gosh, Jim. Thank you. Thank you for opening our eyes to really nothing. Because you're a moron and a crazy person, but a crazy person that's making money off creating fear in people. So, well done. Well done. Continuing to start this insanity that you were a part of as being one of the, what would you say, premier founding? I'm not saying he's the first, but one of the biggest televangelists, the snake oil salesman of our time. Back in the 80s, you were such a pioneer in ripping people off. Oh, Jim, I'm so glad you haven't turned away from your ways. And you're trying to use the Bible to scare people into buying a bunch of powdery crap so they won't have the mark of the beast. Have you ever had a class in hermeneutics? Have you really deeply read into eschatology? Do you really even understand Revelation? Not really. You're just taking it off of the kind of crackpot, crazy Christian version of how you read Revelation. And the only one of you that is allowed to do that is Kirk Cameron. So seriously, dude, big faux pas, big party foul here. So that's your snark for the week. The rest of this, I actually want to bring to you my good friend, Kris Lowen, who has written a book that I think is interesting and important, and he's starting a Kickstarter campaign. So I want to go ahead and get you into the meat of this, get you into hearing Kris's story, Kris's book, and the important message that Kris has. So without further ado, here it is. Well, today I've got my friend Kris Lowen on the show. Kris is running a Kickstarter campaign to launch his new book, Hidden, a book about secrets. Kris is an avid blogger, a speaker, and serves as the worship and communications pastor for Walla Walla University Church of Seventh-day Adventists. So, Kris, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It is good to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Now, full well, I'm just going to go ahead and lay this out there. So, yeah, Kris and I are friends back from seminary days. Kris is a great guy, a deep thinker, and Kris, I'm excited. I'm excited for this conversation.
Brilliant. Me too. I'm excited as well. We haven't connected in a while, so it's good to reconnect and have a conversation again.
I'm just excited somebody's actually making something worth of their like seminary degree. So like, this is like totally props to you, my friend. Well done.
Thanks. Well, no, congratulations. Yeah, I feel like we're all like pretty hard in the red still with that that degree, but I keep looking. I mean, there's some of our classmates that keep putting stuff out here and there, and are doing good things. So it's a beautiful thing. It was a good experience for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So this book, Kris, like, hidden, and you're writing this book about secrets. So tell me a little about your journey and what led you to write this book.
I've wanted to write for a long time. It's kind of been something that I've both enjoyed and wanted to do. And so after we finished at Fuller, after I finished my degree, I thought, well, maybe now's the time that I start working on a new project, because class was a little bit consuming of life before graduation. So I was just reflecting and thinking, and I had a friend at one point in my life make the observation that secrets are kind of a theme of your life, Kris, and I think that I think that I saw the truth in what he was trying to say. And secrecy and keeping things hidden has been it really has been an ongoing thing that's popped up over and over again over the course just of my growth as a follower of Jesus. And so I kind of just started to play with that idea. What if I wrote something about keeping secrets? And is there anything that has been written? And what have people said? And is there more to say? Is there more things that could be helpful? How could I learn more about this? And how am I still being affected by this? So I guess it's kind of like a coming together of several things, where it's like a personal area of interest and experience, and wanting to contribute, wanting to kind of practice this art form of writing as well. So I don't know, does that kind of maybe gives an idea of where it sort of originated?
So for our conversation today about your book, like, give me like a working definition of secrets, because secrets is one of those words that is kind of out there in the nebulous. Like, you know what I mean? It can mean a lot of different things. So like, in context of your book, like, how would you define secret or secrets?
So the book is about personal secrets. So it's not about state secrets. It's not about business secrets, those kinds of things. It's about personal secrets. So as it applies to the individual. And I define secrets as things that we expend energy to keep hidden. So anything that you're expending energy to keep other people from seeing is probably a secret for you. I think secrets are a social phenomenon. So the thing that differentiates something from being private as opposed to being secret is just that. It's am I expending energy on keeping it hidden? And something that's private, I might not have a charge about, if that makes sense. Like, I might not be wound up. I might not really be concerned if anyone knows about it. I'm not actively worried about someone finding out, but it's not really anybody's business. Like my bank account, right? I don't want people to know my Social Security or credit information or whatever, but I'm not really wound up about whether anybody knows any of the numbers in my bank account. If you were to press me, maybe I would tell you. If you really, really, really pressed me and I made the decision of like, no, there's no way I'm telling you this, then all of a sudden between you and I, there's a secret. I'm keeping that secret. And so sometimes what I've discovered is that sometimes keeping secrets is it's a boundary. It's a form of personal protection. It's protecting my sense of identity. And it's super, super important because it's possible that you could make a claim on something in my life that's private that you have no right to know. And I have every right and even obligation to keep that private, keep that to myself. And if you twist enough, then maybe that becomes something that I'm keeping secret. So, so secrets are things that we expend energy to hide. We expend energy to keep it hidden. So that's kind of my working definition.
No, I like that. And I know, like, part of, like, the thesis for your book, you talk about this, and you said that, like, secrets both inhibit and catalyze personal maturity. So how
Right.
do secrets inhibit your growth and maturity?
Well, I think one of the most basic ways, and one of the ways maybe we think most quickly about secrets, is that if I'm expending energy to keep something hidden, that's energy that could be used somewhere else, right? None of us are limitless. We don't have limitless amount of time or energy or resources. And so if I'm like all wound up and worried about someone finding out about something, and I'm spending energy to keep it hidden, that's energy I could be using on bettering myself, on spiritual disciplines, or being in community, or giving myself in service to the world, whatever it happens to be. Like I know in my own personal life, like as a young adult and as a teenager, I struggled with pornography, which for a lot of us who've gone through that, we keep it secret. That's one of the ubiquitous ones. Anything in the sexual realm is something that we keep secret. And I was really, really concerned with making sure that nobody else knew about that. And it was just a heavy, heavy weight on me. And so I think that's one of the obvious ways that that they hold us back. Of course, I have a friend who says secrets are the pillars of the house of shame, and so typically where you have something that you're keeping secret, often shame goes along with it, and it's sort of a circular thing where if you have something in your life that you're ashamed about, you're probably more likely to keep that secret, and so it sort of builds on itself in this negative cycle of hell, or whatever you want to call it. So and there's endless books about the negative impact of toxic shame, and when you're keeping something hidden, how shame can affect your mental health and relationships, and on and on and on. So I mean, those are a couple ways that I see keeping secrets as being holding us back. One of the things I write in the book is there's a chapter about this, kind of based off of the stuff that Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, you should pray in private, pray in secret. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. He kind of lists off these spiritual disciplines, fasting and whatever, and says, don't let anybody know. Keep that very strictly secret. And I think there's a reason for that. The benefit, he actually says, like, if you do it for everyone to see, you have your reward. The possible benefit that you could have gained from doing these practices, you've already gotten. You've received it through, whatever way you're trying to manipulate people or get people to see you in a certain way. Like, that's the reward. But there's another reward that comes to your life if you keep it secret. And so there's other things like that in our life. And this is one of the surprises that I had in studying and kind of researching this book and doing a lot of reading, is that I went into it with the idea of, man, we should just expose everything. Like, tell everyone everything. Don't keep anything secret. Like, any kind of secret in your life, it's going to destroy you, and you need to get it out. That was kind of my initial that was my initial thesis, I guess, essentially. But as I read and studied and worked through stuff, I found, man, no, that needs to be modulated a little bit. There's actually a place for hiding things, and it can be really useful. So that would be one of them. So I mean, I don't know. I could go on and on about examples of.
Well, no. So I want to talk about some of these examples, because I thought that you in the book, you asked like these 3 questions about the potential damage that secrets do, and they kind of are like these concentric circles that echo out. Like you asked the question, how do my own secrets affect me, my life, and the ones I love? And then kind of stepping out, there's how do my secrets impact the wider community in which I live? And then further, how might they even impact the world at large. And can you kind of
Right.
talk a little about that?
Yeah. One of the ways that I think it's interesting is that we all steward secrets. So maybe one of the most obvious ways that happens is as for parents. An axiom that I believe is true that sometimes people struggle with it, but I still think it's true, is the right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And you can really quickly think of a lot of I don't know, like bodily functions or whatever, where very clearly that's true. But I think it's true just especially in terms of growth and in terms of kids. Mm-hmm. And shoot, man, like working with so much about parenting is like trying to teach your kids timing and this isn't the right moment for that. But especially as a parent, I'm a steward of secrets. There's a whole adult world, for good and for bad, really great, beautiful things. And then, darker things. There's a whole adult world that my 6-year-old does not know about, mm-hmm. and should not know about when he's 6.
Yeah, totally.
And if he's let in on some of that too early, that exposure is very damaging. And I think we all pretty much know this, at least in some respect. I mean, sometimes we have debates about, should we shelter our kids, or how sheltered should they be, or mm-hmm. when should we let them? I don't know. My wife and I were having a debate a couple months ago about what's the right age to let your kids watch Star Wars. I don't know if you've had that debate in your house, but this has been a conversation for us, is like trying to figure out what the right age is. I don't know if we've made it there yet, but as parents, part of our job is to pull back the curtain of the adult world at the right time, in the right ways. If we leave that curtain down for too long, and we just don't let our kids in, and we just keep them in the bubble for far too long, far too much, then that's going to eventually damage them. It's, their bubble's going to pop, or they're going to fall off the deep end, or they're going to inherit a bunch of dysfunctional behaviors, or all kinds of possible stuff that has and does happen if someone's sheltered too long. But then on the exposure end, of course, like so much damage can come, and we've built structure into our society for protecting kids, like especially protecting kids whose parents are not able to protect them. And so that's one area where I think of secrecy as it applies sort of beyond, in one of those wider circles, like and then thinking even further, I write in the book about rites of passage, especially rites of passage into adulthood, which I guess is maybe a similar thing. I kind of am not so sure that parents are universally responsible for inviting their children into adulthood. Like, I think that they're a part of it, but I think it's more of a community thing. And in American culture, we've lost a lot of rites of passage. We really don't have them that much. I mean, there's little pockets here and there, but I think we have multiple generations of people that aren't really totally sure what it means to be an adult. And I think this is an area that thinking about secrets can be really helpful for maturity, because the traditional rites of passage are kind of these ceremonies or events or processes that people go through where their community collectively peels back what it means to be an adult in this time and place and among these people, and then sort of bestows on the person that responsibility and says, we believe in you, and you have a job to do, and this is what you need to do to be an adult, and you're now in on the secret. And man, in my mind, that's world changing. Mm-hmm. Like I think one of the things that, for example, I think one of the things that sets kids, close your ears if you're listening to this. This is adult material, but I think one of the things that sets an adult apart from a child is that an adult knows why he or she is here. They know why they were made and what their mission is on earth. They know what they're supposed to be about, what they're supposed to be doing. And man, if someone knows that and they're clear on what they're here for and they're actively pursuing that, man, that, talk about influencing more spheres and world shaping and that, that dynamic, whether or not someone knows what their personal mission, that isn't all about secret keeping. But it has something to do with it. It has something to do with it.
No, but I think you're right. I mean, I think when you were even talking about like the idea of initiation into things, I mean, I think that, for myself being a dad of 4 kids, but also myself having, worked with youth a lot in the past, I think what I've seen is there's a lack of intentionality in parenting that happens, that we assume that there's certain stages, like, oh, they turn 16, they get a driver's license or they graduate. But those things aren't necessarily that deeply meaningful.
Right.
They don't offer net purpose. They're just kind of a thing that I can check that off my list and continue to move forward. And without kind of intentionality or without like giving people a greater perspective of, like you were saying, like why we're here or what does this mean or why does this matter? Those are the important questions that tend to happen. And I think that without guidance, without especially young people being able to know, why is this a big deal? Or like for your kids, like, Dad, why can't I watch Star Wars? Or the question a few of my kids have asked is, why can't I watch Game of Thrones? And my answer is, trust me, no, you're not ready for this.
Nobody is ready to watch it, honestly.
And so some of it being, but what for as a parent, I've adopted that of being able to say, and my wife and I have really worked hard of saying, we will always tell you guys the truth. But within that, we will also tell you not yet on certain things. Because, again, contextually, like, I could tell them everything that I know about this, that, or the other in life, but without experience or without them being at the correct age to receive it, it's just kind of white noise.
Right. And if you keep pounding on it and pounding on it and pounding on it and they're not ready for it, man, you can go deaf to it. And then later when they are ready to hear it, they can't hear it.
And it's interesting because, I grew up in a household where intentionality wasn't the biggest thing. I mean, I'm not saying like my parents were horrible people or abusive people, but it was simply just, I was just there. There wasn't like initiation. There wasn't intentionality. And it was kind of like I had to figure out life on my own. And when you begin to step into that, especially growing up, like I grew up around conservative circles. Conservative circles operate a lot out of that whole like shame and guilt should keep you in check. But they don't exactly tell you why shame and guilt exists. They don't tell you why these things matter or why these things should be, that you should wait on this. None of it's necessarily explained. You're just necessarily told this is bad. Don't do it. And so those things, I think those circles can oftentimes create toxic situations. And one thing, especially, I think that you got into that was really, really interesting. You talked about the importance of confession. And I feel like that is a spiritual discipline that has been lost, like in Protestant circles,
right.
Especially it's like, oh, it sounds too Catholic. We can't do that. But I think when we've gone there and we've eliminated this idea of confession, we've also eliminated this whole idea of being authentic with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. That practice is just completely life-changing. And I know there's some Protestant denominations or churches that practice like communal confession, maybe in the context of like a liturgical worship service or something like that, where we collectively. But I think what you're talking about, what I'm talking about, is a little more about like the personal, individual, my own sins that otherwise, if not confessed, might be secret. And man, that's just completely transformative. In some ways, that's what sort of got me thinking about the power of secrets is when I first started to confess my sin to other people in flesh and blood, life started to change in a totally new, different way. I mean, when you confess, man, you're like, when I'll just put it in, in the first person. When I confess, I am putting myself in someone else's hands. Mm-hmm. They have the goods on me. They could destroy me. They could use that information against me. I could lose that relationship. I mean, if it's something that really is dark, or it really is sin, and I feel, and I'd rather keep it hidden, that is terrifying. And I think that's actually kind of a form of, like a form of death. It's a valley that we have to go through, especially for really heavy stuff. It's almost like you die and you come to life on the other side, because it's that you lose control. You're not in control anymore when you confess. And man, of all of the Christian disciplines, at least for me, that one has made me feel closer to God. I tell people routinely in talks or in sermons or whatever that I did not really start to get, like how any of us really get it, honestly, but I didn't really start to get and understand God's love on like an emotional heart level until I started to confess to people. Like I could talk about it. I think the first time that I really, really confessed, I was an undergrad. I was a theology student. And so I studied for years. I could talk about God's love or whatever subject up one side and down the other. But in terms of emotionally feeling this sense of absolute unconditional affection exactly as I am is life-changing. And for me, I needed, in order for me to really start to get what it was between God and I needed to see that between me and another person. Right? Like it was seeing it. And I love, there's Brian McLaren wrote this book on spiritual practices. I think it's called Naked Spirituality or something. And there's a great quote from that. And I don't have it in front of me. I can't tell it to you, but he essentially says that, like, in seeing that love in you through confession, I'm able to start believing in the love of God that's talked about, in the scriptures, or that's talked about objectively. It opens the door to what is really happening and what it feels like. I don't know, like I talk about confession like it's this panacea that just changes everything and all you need to do is confess. And I don't believe it. Like I believe that confession is one part of that experience of growth and one part of having a spiritual life. Man, it's so important, even though it's not the be all end all. I love there's this text I like from James, the book of James in the New Testament. And he's like talking about healing, like that, if someone is sick, that the elders should come together and pray for lay on hands on the person and pray for them, whatever. And then there's this line, confess your sins to one another and you will be healed. And sometimes I think that we might have a tendency to read that. It may even be translated in some ways where it's like we kind of maybe have the idea that this is talking about, like, I don't know, like salvation in like the eternal sense, and like that, I need to confess because God's going to heal me of my sinful nature or whatever. And like that's true, whatever. But like what the text says is heal. And in the Greek, I won't go like Greek New Testament. But the word in Greek is not the word for being saved. It's the word for being healed, like getting better right here, right now. And I've experienced and have seen it happen so many times, this connection between confessing, not between me and God, not between me and the wall, which is fine. Like there's a whole other area of secrets that's like self-deception and repression and all that. That's all important. But we're talking about confess your sins one to another looking someone else in the eyes and letting them have the goods. There's healing there that I don't know, in my experience, it's not available anywhere else. That there's healing that can be found there, that unless you go through that dark valley, it's just not available. And that doesn't mean that I don't think people can't be saved, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not, it's about like healing in life right now. There's something that can come to my life today if I'm willing to risk that. And man, it's so tragic that the Protestant tribe is kind of written some of that off because of, it's too Catholic or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I've not ever been Catholic, and I don't have a lot of close friends who are, and so I would guess that maybe the Catholic practice of confession, maybe it's not the be all end all, and maybe you can go through it and just be going through the motions and don't get the same benefit. But man, I wish that we had some way of regularly having that as a part of just all forms of Christianity. It's just, immensely important.
No, you're right. And I think that, like, even how you were putting this, oftentimes when I think we think about just talking with God, that can be an abstract thing. The idea of being able to sit with somebody, I mean, and confess and talk with them. I mean, that there's a serious amount of trust and risk that happens with it. But I think, I've had friends I've confided in that it's gone well. I've had friends I've confided in and it hasn't gone well. And I think that, it's easy for us to be like defensive and say like, oh, never again. But I think it's about finding those right people that are life-giving in your life, that can speak into your life, that can help you in the midst of that. And that kind of leads me to one of my questions here, where you reminded me about this. Like, I have a good friend that he was confiding in me about this as a youth pastor. He had gone, this is a number of years back, but he had gone to like a men's retreat at his church, and it was all about like, being honest and letting out your secrets and authentic. And so he shared with the group of men, he's like, I've been struggling with this. I'm going through counseling, but he's like, I'm addicted to pornography. And he's like, it was amazing. It felt so good to speak about this. And then the next week, he had started having parents complain. I heard this went on, or I heard someone talk about it. I heard all this. And eventually he lost his job because of this.
Yeah.
And here's something that I want to ask you about this. And I want your insight into this, because, churches like to use phrases like open, authentic community. But most times, like, that couldn't be further from the truth. And it often feels like churches are the last place that you can be yourself, be completely yourself at, or you can be completely open or authentic with. And so why do you think that we have this kind of conundrum? It's this place where people want to be open, want to be authentic, want to be part of this family or tribe. But, let's just be honest, a lot of churches are not safe places for you to be yourself.
Yeah. So
give me insights, author.
It's hard, man. Just what you're saying is like, not everyone is trustworthy. That's sort of like the underlying part, is not everyone is trustworthy to hear my secrets. And what I've come to believe about my own life is that, so I right now have secrets, right, in my life. And, but there's nothing in my life that's not confessed, if that makes sense. So there's things in my life that, like, it's not for everybody to know. And those have also been, like, I have sins that I have confessed to people that I trust. And because I've done that, I don't think that those things carry the same negative weight. So when I confess like not being generous in a certain situation, or I confess losing my temper and my kids. Now I'm confessing to all your listeners as well. But when I confess that, a lot of the negative stuff that goes along with that slips away. So the negative impact of that potentially staying a secret slips away. I don't feel the shame about it anymore. It doesn't mean that it's all of a sudden right or it's all of a sudden fixed. But so I don't think that one must be completely 100% transparent in order to not in order to get to sidestep the potential negative effects of secrets in their life. I don't think you have to confess to everyone, but you have to confess to someone. If that makes sense. So like, I think that every church community, please Jesus be true. Every church community has people in it who can be trusted. And every church community probably has people in it that really can't be trusted with my stuff. And it would be detrimental for me and for them, for me to like expose my stuff to them. And so I think it's a careful navigation thing. Like, I mean, I think obviously there are some church communities that maybe do it worse than others and really struggle with this, and they're all full of people, and they're all, they're full of people who are, some are grasping for power, and some are terrified and afraid as they're trying to control everything. And I mean, you have this whole stew of people with different motivations and different issues. And so, I mean, it's hard to speak like across the board, but I'm a pretty big proponent of like, no, like you need to confess to someone, but not to everyone. And there's some people that are just not trustworthy to hear it or to receive it. There's this great story I heard on, I really like the Reply All podcast. It's a podcast about the internet, and I'm kind of nerdy and I like tech. And so I listened to this, and they told a story about maybe in the last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, they told a story about the first person who had a webcam, a 24/7 webcam, and it's called Jenny Cam. I don't know. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
It was in the late 90s. Like 98 or something. And her first webcam was a black and white camera that took a still photo every 20 minutes. And she was kind of like a web developer. Like she knew how to write code and websites and whatever. So she had this script where this camera would take a picture and it would automatically publish to her website just on its own. And the whole idea was that she would expose everything from her life to the world. There would be no filter whatsoever, and she would just be completely transparent to let people see what was going on in her life. And eventually this became like a really popular site, Jenny Cam. And she had, I don't know, 13 or 18 cameras. I don't know how many. She had a whole bunch of cameras, and they were live streaming, and she just like put her life on. And one of the things she kind of talks about in this interview on this podcast was that it started out as she wanted to just be really, really authentic and like expose everything. And what she discovered over time was that everything became an act. So it actually turned into the exact opposite. That the whole, like she thought that, and this is, kind of me being like a preacher on it and getting all homiletical, but in her mind, and exposure would somehow equate to authenticity or intimacy or connection. And what she discovered was that exposure actually was the exact opposite of that, because she ended up performing. And so I'm fascinated by her story, because I don't think the solution is, man, I just got to be completely vulnerable all the time with everyone in every way. And I mean, we've all kind of been around people that are like a little too vulnerable. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, I cringe imagining that I'm that person sometimes, and I probably have been, but there's moments where, man, it's like just someone's I mean, people overshare on social media. People and it's just not like, it's uncomfortable sometimes, but it's also like, man, I wouldn't want the wrong people to know about that.
I know, and it's hard because like I get to that place where there's people I want to be like, I just want to message them privately and be like, just please stop. I mean, it's not like there are times where filters are okay.
Right, I think so.
To where, and that like kind of leads me to think about this too, because when we talk about secrets, we have like especially like how this has been happening lately. We have like the Roy Moores, the Henry Weinsteins, the Louis C.K.'s, all these Kevin Spacey's, all this coming out, and we begin to see that like there's like this connection between like secrecy and then denial. We're seeing this where people are like, this happened, I have proof. No, this didn't happen. And it's, you know what I mean? And it like boggles my mind. I was watching like this quasi press conference for supporters of Roy Moore earlier today. I only could last like 10 minutes. And I was just like, well, and part of me was like, oh my gosh, I can I just sit here and just completely be snarky in the comments? No, I'm not doing anything like positive here. It was just because and for me, what was driving me crazy was they kept invoking God and Jesus and all this kind of stuff, and I'm just like, just leave God out of this. You know what I mean? Like, you can talk about the man, but let's please stop invoking like Jesus or protecting Roy and doing all this other kind of stuff. And I was just like, it boggles my mind. Because on top of that, and I know you mentioned this a few times in the book too, like there's this whole like level of delusion, where we delude ourselves into almost believing our own lies and our own, like that our secrets aren't true. And, and that just tends to be like this huge, like implosion, like this, and that causes even more damage.
Yeah, I mean, and hopefully there's an implosion, because if there's not, man, then this damage just continues to happen. And like in this case, women continue to be abused and hurt. And I mean, man alive, like I'm glad to see, anyway. It's
I'm glad this stuff is coming out. If it would only trickle up to the Oval Office and our sexual predator in chief, that would be great. Give time. I can, I'll invoke Roy Moore's press conference. Please, Jesus, be there with Robert Mueller. Show him the light. Show him the light, Jesus. I'm kidding, but no, but I mean, but Kris, like, thank you so much for this. Like, this has just been, I don't know. And I guess my last question in this is, if there's people that are listening and that are saying like, I've got stuff, and it's heavy, and I don't know what to do with it. And I mean, I know your first bit of advice is buy my book. But
first things first.
Yeah, first things first. No, but secondarily, like if you have people that like this like message is connecting with, because I think this is something that's universal. Like you even mentioned this in your book, that this isn't a Christian thing, and this book isn't written for Christians, but you do use like theological truth in this. But secrets, this is a human issue. And, and so like if someone is struggling with stuff, if someone is feeling weighed down or held back or not, and feeling like that all of this is hampering them moving towards their own personal growth or maturity, like what advice do you give to them?
Man, I'm a huge proponent of a good therapist. Sometimes in the religious world, the Christian world, that's, I don't know, people kind of look down their nose at it. At least I feel like that's the case sometimes in my tribe. It may not be in every tribe, but so as a pastor, I take every opportunity to tell people that I go to therapy, and I have for years, and I highly recommend it. And I think we shouldn't feel ashamed about spending time with therapists. And so the great thing about a therapist is that it's someone you pay to be confidential, and it's someone that you pay to, like, that you can trust them. And obviously there's examples of whatever negative things that can happen, but man, if there's nobody at all in your life at all that you can find that's trustworthy, you could talk to stuff about, a therapist is a great person. But man, I would encourage someone to just think about who who do I trust? Is there anyone I trust? Sometimes I know that there's that, circles of trust is kind of like cliche and has been overused, but maybe it's cliche because there's a little bit of truth in it. And that's that, like, if it's possible to have nobody inside the circle. It's possible to live in a place where we just trust nobody. And I don't think that that's healthy for anyone. And so it might be for someone listening that they really, really, really need to work hard and think hard about who in my life could I possibly trust. Maybe it's not like who do I trust? Maybe if there's nobody, but who maybe could I imagine possibly maybe trusting, who might be someone that I could talk to. It doesn't mean I'm going to, but maybe, because I have I have all these axioms. I think that trust is earned, but love is not. And a lot of times we get those the other way around, where we think that love is earned and that we should trust everybody. But I think it's the opposite. I think trust is earned slowly. And I think there's ways so if you can think of someone who maybe might be trustworthy, there's ways that we can test those people.
Yeah.
And kind of, and it always requires some risk. Building trust always requires a risk, and that's part of how it works. But there's you can do low risk things. Talk to them about a certain, I'm afraid of taking my driver's test next week. I'm worried about this or that thing going on in my life. And is that held in confidence, or is that used against you? And that can be an indicator of whether or not this person is trustworthy. And so as a person, people, if we trust someone a little bit and they prove trustworthy, we can trust them more and more. So it kind of can be a grind, but I guess those would be two things that I would think about very specifically if you got heavy stuff.
Yeah.
No, no shame in therapy, and yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I love that, and one little caveat, and this is actually not against what you were saying, but even thinking about this, one thing like I've learned just over being in ministry and around churches my most of my adult career, is that pastors think they're counselors. But they are not trained therapists. And there is a big difference. They may take one class in seminary on pastoral counseling, and that's not the same. And so I loved how you were saying is go find a therapist, go find somebody who knows actually how to deal with that. And this isn't a knock at pastors. Actually, no. It is. To some degree, it's a knock when they assume that they're as good as a therapist that's been trained.
Yes.
That is a clinical therapist. So that's my only caveat to people listening to that. And again, it's not against what you're saying. I think you're spot on and right. And we're about to run out of time here. But one thing I want to do is, Kris, you are running your Kickstarter campaign, and you are like over a third of the way there, and you are trying to raise money to be able to get this book edited and launched. The book is finished. It's done. I've been reading it. It's very good. And so how do people that are listening to this find this? They go to Kickstarter.com. I know that they can look for Hidden, a book about secrets. Anything else you want to tell them?
Right. So you can find the campaign on Kickstarter right now, Kickstarter.com. And if you search for secrets or you search for Hidden, it'll come up within the first 3 or 4 items. You can also go to hiddenbook.net, just like it sounds, hiddenbook.net. And that will redirect straight exactly to my Kickstarter page. So that may be the easiest way, just hiddenbook.net. And yeah, if you are interested in getting a copy, this is a way to kind of pre-order it. I'm going to self-publish the book, and I want to hire an editorial team to make it polished. I mean, it's just like Stuart said, that the manuscript is written, it's ready to go. I'd really like it to be tight and polished and in really great shape. So I want to get some professional eyes on it, some people that care more about the book than they do about my feelings, and really make it good. So I would love any support you can offer. If you'd share the campaign with people you think would be interested in it, or if you'd like to pledge yourself, man, I'd be forever grateful.
I think I even saw on there that if you pledge, I think it's over $1,000 or $2,000, Kris will actually be your own priest for you to confess to. And
it's in honor of the Reformation.
Yes.
You know, right? All I need is a check, and
Yes. Kris is a very humble and gracious man, and I will go ahead and say this in a less humble and gracious manner. So go to Kickstarter, look up Hidden or Secrets on here, and what you're doing is you're looking for this sexy bearded man sitting in a chair in a video, and that's Kris. That's the dude you're pledging to. And seriously, let's get this book launched. Let's get this out there. Let's do something. Let's get behind Kris in this, because essentially, if you're a human, you have secrets, and this is a great book for you to be able to read. So I think this is for everybody. So Kris, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to see where this is going to go.
Well, that's all the time we got this week. Have a wonderful holiday week, and we will catch you again next week here at Snarky Faith Radio. I'm out of here.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Aqueduct Conference Centre was established in 1978 as a peaceful destination for small group meetings, special events, conferences, retreats, and weddings. For more information, go to www.aqueductcc.com. We are also sponsored by Lumen. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be better than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.